3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 105. I think it's episode 105 of the Midweek Metagame. I'm Patrick Robertson, joined today by one of our regular co-hosts, Gabriel Nassif.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
And since Harry is busy with schoolwork today, we've gotten the second best option, streamer extraordinaire, Rivals member, or MPL relegate, Kanister MTG. What's up, Kanister?
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's absolutely a pleasure. Well is usually what Harry would say, but I'm going to not do that. I'm going to just jump straight into things. We're going to talk a lot about Modern this week. Obviously, Kanister and Gab both streamed a lot of Modern over the last little while. Been playing a lot of 4-color control, two different builds of this deck. So we're going to get, hopefully get into the weeds of those, talk about challenge results over the weekend. But before we get into anything else, I have to tell you that this podcast is brought to you by Magic Card Market. Magic Card Market is a online marketplace where you can buy and sell various trading card paraphernalia. You can buy, sell. That's basically it. I said that several times. It doesn't have to be Magic. It could be Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever. Sealed product. Who cares? Go to Card Market. They've been our sponsors for a while. They treat us well. Please do business with them. The podcast is also brought to you by yourselves, the Patreon. So if you want to get involved, get in the Discord, have a chat. Patreon.com/Midweek Metagame is the best place to do so. Obviously, no obligation. Content will always be free. Anyway, why don't we jump into things? Gab, Kanister, both had solid weekends in the challenges. X2 or better for both parties on the Saturday and the Sunday. Both playing 4-color control. Two different builds, though. Gab is kind of taking more of a kind of Planeswalker control route, and Kanister moving more in the kind of ephemerate blink route. Since you're the guest, you can go first. Kanister, how long have you been playing this deck? Where did it evolve from? And tell me why you like it and what's been going on with it in Modern and why you think it's good.
It's been a while now that I've been playing this deck. The 4-color, Yorion, Ephemerate, Blink, whatever. Like, it kind of lacks a catchy name, I have to say. It's frequently, I don't have, a good, one-word name to refer to it. But, I don't know, it's been a month, too, since I've picked it up and started playing it and, taking it as my, let's say, main deck to play challenges with. And even before that, I was playing Elementals a lot and having decent results with it. This deck wasn't necessarily built by me, but Martinez TP on Magic Online was having a few top 8s in Modern Challenges with the non-Elementals version of Blink, and when I changed, I kind of realized it's probably kind of similar idea, but better executed. Instead of trying to use Risen Reef and Tribal Synergy, you just play more good cards and a little bit of synergy. And
that's exactly what I've seen over the kind of 6 or so weeks that you've been playing this as well. Is kind of evolution from that a shell which is not gimmicky so to say, but tribal synergy heavy in the Elementals deck, and shaping away the good cards really seems to be the direction that Modern's going right now. Just play your best cards in all on curve and this sort of stuff. So it's obviously been working out. What is it specifically about kind of the elemental synergies that you needed to get away from?
Well, I wouldn't say there was much to get away from, but rather that every format eventually condenses to a point where playing good cards is better than worse cards, probably, right? So that's just kind of natural evolution. The main upsides over the Elementals deck for the 4-color Blink deck, I would say, is the fact that you get to play, besides a slightly higher individual card quality, you get to play cards that are cheaper. Elementals kind of struggled with the fact that it didn't have good cards that cost 1 or 2 mana. And so you kind of were banking on Utopia Sprawling into a free drop, just very often. And with the Blink deck, you get to play Ren 6 as more cheaper removal and iteration as a cheap card advantage engine, etc. It's just that you get better cards and you get cheaper cards, so that makes the deck a little bit better.
And so this weekend, obviously, two kind of pretty two top 16 finishes, going X2 both times. What matchups in the format do you really like, and where do you think this deck struggles?
Yeah, the 4-color Blink deck, it's very pointed towards beating the parts of the metagame that play to the board, let's say. So blue-red Murktide, very centered about resolving its threats and then protecting them with counter magic and winning the game this way. So if you kill everything, then you're gonna win. Hammer Time, virtually the same. Like virtually any Lurus deck is also kind of weak to removal, tribal, and card advantage. So this deck is pointed at being good against those, with varying degrees of its like kind of. Well, let's say that its control matchup can depend heavily on how many cards that are good against control you're going to exactly include, and at the same time, it's also a deck that is very weak to the, let's say, more fringe decks, like the combo decks. Tron, Belcher, even like decks like Lotus Field combo, those are pretty hellishly hard for the Yorion Blink deck at times.
Yeah. What about, is it Murktide ever since they started playing 2 Blood Moons to Jace in the sideboard? Has that made things like much tougher for you? Because I've been kind of doing okay in the matchup with the kind of the control build with counter spells and force of negation, but did that make a difference for you in the past couple of weeks?
Well, from what I know, Blood Moon is kind of played all the time, like in some capacity in Blue-Red. But I think one of the advantages of the Yorion Blink build is that it's not very weak to Blood Moon. It actually shrugs of Blood Moon pretty well. Abundant Growth does a lot here. Even with how it's backed on Magic Online, where it doesn't work when it's enchanting it works timestamp wise when you enchant a non-basic. So if you enchant a Shockland, they play Blood Moon, you only get red mana from that. You should get any color of mana per rules. You should do that in paper, but it's been backed on Magic Online for like years, probably. Even with that, you can just enchant the basics, and I have found that Blood Moon is like very hit or miss. It just can definitely lock you on turn 3, but it's not a huge threat in the matchup. Although I do play scared of it all the time. But like even with those like adaptations that Murktide does, I think the matchup is very good for Yorion Blink.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be a product of the fact that there's 12 threats that are very easily answered by the selection of creatures and removal that you have in your deck. I also wouldn't be too afraid of Jace from this 4-color control side. It just feels like you're well equipped to at least match pace in terms of card advantage with a card like Jace. Between the Eternal Witnesses and Ephemerates and your Omnaths and various different planeswalkers, I can imagine keeping pace over at least over a couple of turns to try and answer the Jace.
Yeah, you can also use Fury Bolts. Like there are just ways you can counter the Jace. There's plenty of like ways available. Although it is probably better for them to have the Jace than if they wouldn't have the Jace.
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, I remember when I was playing Murktide against Elementals, it was really just a matter of hoping that you could Blood Moon them, and that would kind of let you resolve your threats, and kill them, essentially. But they would answer your 12 threats incredibly easily. I wanted to get around to talking a little bit about sideboard choices you made. You said that the blue-white control matchups about as good as how much energy you put into fighting it. So you've got one copy of Emrakul the Promised End in your sideboard. Has that been something that you've been trying a lot recently or had success with?
It is a card I've been playing for the past few weeks, and since I only play one in an 80-card deck, it's in the sideboard it doesn't like come up that often. I think it's probably pretty good. I'm not sure if the best card for the job, but might be that more Veils, more Mystical Disputes, the cheap cards are better as a combo of Witness, etc. But I think there is also value in having one big card to find in your deck when you are casting Expressive Iteration a lot.
I can definitely understand that.
Kanister and I actually played round one of the challenges this weekend. Did you bring that card against me? Did you bring Emrakul in against me or not? Or is that just really for control?
I should have. I mean, isn't your deck control? I did bring the Emrakul, yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't bring in my endurance for game 2, I think, and then you had endurance. It was pretty good, and I was like, and we were low on time, so I actually brought in, I think, all my endurances for game 3, which I guess would make the Emrakul a little worse. But yes, people were talking to me about Emrakul, saying maybe I should have one in my sideboard, and because you've been playing that deck for what, 2 months, and I feel like you top 8 or you go X2 or top 8 almost every single challenge. It's been like kind of an unreal run, whether it was when you were still playing like the heavy elemental version and the Urion version. I feel like you've played this. You haven't played anything else, right, in challenges in the past 2 months? There's been all Omnath decks?
I played a few challenges with different decks. Like I played one challenge with blue-white and top 8 with blue-white too.
Okay.
But like for the most part, I was like, I think I'm getting a grasp on how to build this Urion deck. It also gets better, and I get more comfortable. And it just one thing that we started doing in my Discord too with Bamzing and data collecting guy.
Yeah.
We were staying in the challenges, like me and like a few other Discord members were staying in the challenges until they finish, so we can collect the metagame data, see who exactly is playing in those challenges and what is the metagame spread of people entering. And I'm frequently like a player who kind of like adds the cards to my sideboard in a reactionary way. I lose to burn, just like +2 core firewalkers, and then I lose to mill +1 big Eldrazi.
Yeah.
Etc. Then I lose to Belcher and I like go run and add 4 Dogmis Vitas into my deck. And that obviously like then doesn't necessarily pan out because you're not gonna play against Belcher in your next 20 matches probably. So when we started collecting the data, we've been doing that for the past 3 or 4 challenges. We collected the metagame data, and it turns out that there's actually so many. Like the metagame share of the best 2 decks, Hammer and Murktide, is pretty damn big. And I don't have it right now, but I could like look it up. But it like kind of also made me realize how big those 2 decks are, and like how actually unlikely I am to face against the
bad matchups.
The bad matchups, the like random decks, Tron decks, etc.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting to me that you gathering this data and you're seeing what essentially Modern has a trend that Modern hasn't really followed for a majority of its lifespan. So often it was the narrative is like Modern tournaments. Who knows what's going to turn up? You're going to there'll be like 2% of every deck in the format in the room, and you're never likely to play the same matchup more than once. And but here you're seeing kind of a really significant portion, like even ballpark numbers, kind of like at least even double figures would surprise me for a deck like for any one deck in a Modern metagame. But is that what you're seeing in these results?
Yeah, like we have like a challenge with 90 players, and you see that there's like 15 Murktide players in it, or something like that, and it's a pretty high amount. And then you see that the large portion of the metagame is made up of those matchups that you can target pretty easily and like make sure that your 4-color blink deck is good and well sideboarded against. And then I think that's a pretty decent recipe for having a good time in a Modern challenge, at least right now. Like it's possible that the metagame is going to change, but I'm going to probably try to collect more data from the challenges because it really helped me.
How do you go about collecting the data?
Well, you just have to manually watch the replays from round 1 and just write it down in a spreadsheet. That's what we do.
Oh, wow, okay.
Once the tournament ends, if you haven't dropped out of the tournament or haven't closed the window, you can still do that. As soon as you close the window, there's no going back on Magic Online.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing, that once you were still in the tournament, you could replay. So you have to keep the window open, the tournament has to be over, and then you can replay matches? Wow.
Yes, you can view replays of every match.
Every match of every round?
Yes. Any given match you want, you can open it.
That's incredible.
I didn't even know that was a thing. That's so
what
weird.
An incredible Moto quirk.
Yeah. It's not apparent, I guess. It's not obvious that you can do that.
Yeah, it doesn't even make a ton of sense.
It used to be the case that you could have, even if you were not in the event, you could have watched it, but it's been changed with, I think, this most recent Moto version, which was 10 years ago at this point, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do remember you could replay pretty much anything, anytime. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I remember that era like in V3 or whatnot. Yeah, that's fantastic. So this is with Bamzing on Twitter. Is that right?
Bamzing is the name Kanister said. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. So you should, if you're listening at home, you should probably go follow their Twitter account. They post results from the challenges, or at least the modern challenges, every weekend, and they've got the fastest output essentially of who's won and who's top 8'd. So probably worth a follow there. That's awesome detective work though. So this is all going on in your Discord though, like your stream's Discord.
Yes. Well, yes, it does require manually collecting the data, and does take half an hour to an hour or something to look through all the matches and write it down, etc. So it's a little bit tiresome, but so far I'm doing that because I find it fun and kind of interesting to look at, and I think it does help me plan for the next challenges to conquer them. Yeah.
Well, your run has certainly been pretty reasonable over the last few months at the very least. So maybe it's paying off. Why don't we move to your weekend, Gab? So you're playing this kind of the different version of this 4-color mid-range control deck. You're obviously more Planeswalker focused, and you play Mender counter spells or whatnot. So why don't you talk a little bit about that deck that you've been having a lot of success with in the last week or so?
Yeah, I believe we brought it up in last week's episode. It was a list that caught my eye in the prelims. It was House of Mana MTG. Jack Potter, who was just fresh off Mox participation, got a 2-4 NOs, was a list that looked really cool. It was 4-color Omnath control, 4 counter spells, 3 force of negations, and then the rest of the deck is just tap out for the good planeswalkers, Omnath, and you back it up with Solitude, Iteration, Prismatic Ending, and Verdict. So, I said I was going to try it. I don't always follow through, but I did. I fired a league, went 5-0, second one, trophied again, third one, trophied again, 3 trophies in a row. Hadn't happened in, I don't know. Probably last time was when I went on that run was a terrible white-black sewer deck, but yeah, so the deck was just playing out really nicely, and the way it's built is that you're basically trying to tap out for all the good cards. So Force of Negation makes sense because you get to tap out on your turn, force something on their turn, or Solitude something on their turn. You have Counterspell, which is kind of early interaction on turn 2 or later in the game, kind of lock up the game. Good synergy with Teferi here of Dominaria. You've got Red and 6 Teferi Time Raveler. You've got Sunchase Mind Sculpture. And just deck just kept winning, So I decided to give it a go in the challenges, and that went pretty well as well. I went 6-2 on Saturday. I was actually 6-0, but I got pared down at some points. Lost the last 2. My breakers were not so good, so I came in 10th. And then on Sunday, I decided to run in back. Went 6-1 in the Swiss, top 8, and then I lost in the quarterfinals to the blue-red Murktide deck. But yeah, it's just another, we've seen so many variations of these Omnath decks, whether it's Yorion, more on the controller side was Archmage Charm and Cryptic Command, full elementals, full tap out, and this is just a different take. It makes sense. It's just kind of a mid-range deck, and I've had success with it.
What about good matchups, bad matchups? Do you feel that you're strong in the same places that Kanister feels that his deck is strong, or do you pick up your percentage points elsewhere?
It's tough. I've mostly been winning. I have like 30 wins and 6 losses overall between the leagues and the challenges. And I found Hammer Time to be pretty decent. You've got solid game plan, you've got the answers, and you also pack Force of Vigor in the sideboard. I found Murktide, I feel, is close. In the Saturday challenge, I went 4-0 in games against my 2 Murktide opponents, but then it was my 1 loss in the quarters, even though I didn't play very well. It's tough. It feels like you have a good game plan, you have the answers, but they can out-tempo you. Maybe whoever draws the most iteration. I need a bigger sample size because there's a lot of variance to the matchup. Whether if they're on the play and they have a 1-drop, I feel like the games can get really tough. They've been playing Spell Pierce and Force of Negation too, which is pretty scary if they get to back up their Ragavan with a Spell Pierce on your Renin 6. So it looks like it shouldn't be so great for the Omnath side, but I've been doing okay. I think the Blood Moons and the Jace out of the sideboard are really good because the deck's pretty weak to Blood Moon. Kanister's version's not as weak. He's got Abundant Growth and maybe more answers, more cards you can play, and maybe less double casting, less cards like Jace or cards that are double colored mana essentially. But this deck doesn't function very well under Blood Moon, and you're not as good as dealing with Jace because you don't play Lightning Bolt. Play just a copy of a Fury or 2, but I'm not even sure you want them after sideboard. And Force of Negation after sideboard is kind of double-edged sword because they have all these Spell Pierce and maybe Fluster, Storm, and Dispute. And the matchup, I think, is attrition based, so it might just, it comes down to, do they have a good start? Who draws more expressive iterations? They maybe cheese you as a Blood Moon or a Jace. So I don't have a great answer there. And then I've done somehow okay against Blue-Eyed Control. I actually got paired against Wafo and Mr. Kef. We had back-to-back rounds on Saturday, and I didn't drop a game. I just basically jam, and they have to deal with every card. I think one thing that good for the current version of the deck is that they don't play Force of Negation, and they have Veto over Dispute for the most part after sideboard. I think they had a few disputes on Sunday, but not on Saturday. And that helps you because they can't really tap out easily for their own planeswalkers because you get to punish them, whereas you get to tap out and if they stumble, they kind of lose. You also maybe get some free wins where you just go turn 2 Renin 6 on the play since they don't have Force of Negation. If they tap out for an ending, you can just follow it up with a free mana Teferi. So that matchup has been good. I think Wafo lost to me. He also lost in the semifinals of the Sunday Challenge to that deck.
Yeah, that's what it looks like from the result. I think it's just really interesting that you managed to get paired against Wafo Tapper twice, 2 rounds in a row. That's the most remarkable part of the story.
Yeah. One thing that's really important on Magic Online is the time, though. The games go on forever.
Oh, there were some very stressful matches to watch.
Yeah. Literally my first 2 rounds of the tournament thing, I was under 30 seconds. So that matchup, Burn has been pretty close. I think the matchup is good. I think in general, all these Teferi plus Solitude decks have good matchup against Burn now. Whether it's the Blue-Eyed Control decks. I had the same feeling when I was playing Blue-Eyed Control. It felt like you didn't even really need to have these Sunset Revelry in your sideboard. You're not going to be a massive favorite, but I've been liking the matchup. I think you're slightly
I feel like
favored.
that's all down to counterspell in the format. It's just so good to have your turn 2 reactive spell be relevant on turn 5, turn 6. as opposed to a card like Mana Leak or Remand or whatnot that you might have played in the past. Just having access to that hard counter when you're stabilizing is just so important.
Yeah, so many games play that way in old blue-white control where you just get burned out, you would kind of stabilize, but you'd get burned out, you would draw some dead cards. So
yeah, and like you have to like you're almost compelled to trade your Mana Leak for anything you possibly could early in the game rather than holding it for an important time while developing your game. And with Counterspell, it just doesn't matter. It's just always live.
Yeah.
I've certainly felt that way about the burn matchup with any of these kind of blue decks. It just feels like for Murktide, like the fast threat plus Counterspell backup with these Omnath, and then Counterspell plus Teferi Time Raveler, forcing them to play at sorcery speed makes stabilizing and closing the game relatively trivial. Kanister, how's burn for your more kind of creature focused version?
It's pretty similar, I would say. You mentioned Counterspell for sure relevant. Well, that's relevant for my deck that doesn't play it too often, but also largely it's Omnath. Probably it's a bit worse when you play with Yorion because then you draw Omnath a bit less often than you draw in 60 if you're playing the same amount of Omnaths. But I've been happy with my burn matchup ever since I've also moved to playing Spreading Seas in the main deck of the deck I'm playing, which
that's an underrated card against burn for sure.
Yeah, it's one of the probably better than Lightning Helix TBH.
Is it
maybe not? Well, it's very good though.
Is it even good on the draw?
I think it is.
I think just cutting off double spelling is really important.
Well, just look at a burn deck list, right? And look at how many of the cards cost a red symbol. What can they spend a blue mana on? And the answer is that they can spend it on grabbing a Blurus, cycling a Sandbag Canyon, or paying the full cost of one of the free CMC spells, Skewer or Riftbolt. And I guess they can also play Rolling Vortex. So there is some stuff they can do with that land, but it's not that much. So it is fairly close to just killing a land. And once they don't have lands, they cast their spells more slowly. You've got time to do stuff. Sometimes they keep hands that are low light, and you just they have 2 lands, and you seize one, and then it's checkmate. They can't cast their Boros Charm till forever. They can only cast 1 spell per turn, and just are not quick enough. And also, the play draw, I think, kind of less relevant for cards like Seize ever since the removal costs 0 mana, because it's going to spend the same amount of mana on Soul doing a Goblin Guide on the play or on the draw, which
that's an underrated point.
Yeah, you're happier to do that on the draw because on the play you have less cards and you don't need to, so that's okay too. But it's not, the cards are not that much worse in the draw like Seize. The cards like Seize are not that much worse in the draw, I would say, because of the free removal.
All right. So we were talking about matchups. Other matchups. The matchup that I lost to, I mean, my sample's not as big as Kanister, so it's a lot of just, not in that deck, a small sample basically. So I lost to two red-black decks actually. A red-black Spike, really close match, but I felt a little tough. The card Turak was really rough. Protection from white is a big deal. The discard's annoying. The body is there's just not that many cards that deal with the protection from white creature in the deck. Then I lost to the Grixis Shadow matchup. That was one of my baddest losses, I guess, as in didn't feel too close. So I don't know if it was just my draws or if matchup is bad. Overall, I've liked the deck. It feels like a lot of matchups are close. Kind of like a Jund deck, but maybe a good Jund deck.
Well, I can share my experience with the Elementals deck and etc. It was that the Elementals deck was super great in the late game against virtually any Lurus deck. because you said you lost to those Lurus decks, but I was semi-frequently still losing games to a 1-drop, especially on the draw. They played a 1-drop, and I was like, oh, shucks. I don't have my removal because I only used to play prismatic endings. If you just play more 1-mana removal, that is what's really gives you those Lurus matchups for those 4-color decks. Like it's as simple as that. Like the most realistic way for them to lose is to stick a Ragavan trigger a few times, like get super ahead and do like stuff where you have to care about your life total, your card quantity, etc. And if you just have like a significant amount of 1-mana removal, then you're gonna be good, I think.
Yeah, I was definitely a little stubborn since I was doing so well. I never tried Lightning Bolt in the deck. There was also the problem of the sideboard Chalice. There was a lot of matchups where Lightning Bolt is good, Chalice is also going to be good after sideboard, and I was already having issues when I had Veil of Summer. I was bringing Veil and Chalice against Murktide, and it was all awkward, so I just heavily relied on Solitude, Prismatic Ending, maybe Instant Speed Prismatic Ending with Teferi, but it's true that Ragavan's kind of a pain, and they know about it.
Yeah, especially the dashed one, right?
Yeah, exactly. They make a point of just dashing it a lot and not actually casting it, and that's usually enough. So if I was to play the deck some more and try different things, I would definitely try maybe a couple bolts in the main deck, maybe just a bolt or two in the main and more bolts in the sideboard and no Chalice, but Chalice also good against Living End. That's one deck that's still popular. I think that matchup is good for the version I was playing because you got the counters, you got the Teferi, and after sideboard you got Chalice and Endurance. Of course, Living End, you can't underestimate that deck. They can just beat your nut draws with Grief and Subtlety and their own Force and Disputes, but overall it felt like it should favor it.
Well, there's one thing that you can do. You can just play Chalice and you can not board it for 1-drops. In fact, like Chalice for 1-drops versus the Lurus decks, I'm kind of not a big fan of that as I'm playing Modern lately, as it kind of compounds on the problem you already have. Like you are the weakest on the draw versus their like strong opening when you keep a clunky hand. And with Chalice, you're just gonna kind of make it easier for yourself to have a cumbersome hand that's gonna go, oh, nothing, okay, Ragavan hits you, oh, play Chalice, oh, Ragavan hits you again. I don't know. Destroy Chalice and you are absolutely screwed for that reason.
Yeah, I'm usually not a fan of the cheese plans that involve cards like Chalice, but I felt like it's been so strong, and a lot of the games you win easily are just turn to Chalice. Maybe it's just trying to play the game in easy mode, and you're paying for it in different ways. But I felt the same way in Blue-White Control. My core, I'm like, I don't want to have to rely on cards like Chalice to win the matchups. I just want the deck to be, kind of inherently good and not rely on the cheese strategy. But I feel like Chalice has been a big part as to why Blue-White is good, even though Waffle past weekend, he only had the Chalices in his sideboard. No Chalice in the main deck. I think he added maybe a Darwin's Veto and had the one Cryptic Command back in, something like that. So
one thing I think is really interesting about the Chalice plan versus specifically Murktide is what cards are you really particularly concerned about that cost 1 mana out of their deck that aren't answerable by a 1 mana interaction? Like they don't really interact at 1 mana in a meaningful way with you. Like it's like Heat and Bolt, and you can have removal for Ragavan and Dragon Rage channel it, but like they really interact at like 2 mana and 3 mana with 2 mana and 3 mana spells at the very least. So maybe it's better off just having bolts in that matchup and foregoing the Chalices, like Kanister suggested.
Yeah, well, so like one way to think about it is like, how much do you gain from the Chalice in games on the play versus like how much do you lose from sticking to Chalice while being on the draw, because I'm pretty sure that on the draw, like a deck that's like making sacrifices, like not playing Lightning Bolt to be able to support Chalice is worse off. Like I think the deck with Bolt, no Chalice is going to be better off than the deck with no Bolt Chalice when it is on the draw for the most part.
You think you just make the exchange for play draw if you have both cards in your sideboard then?
Oh, well, you could do that. It's pretty hard to, you only are allowed to have a limited amount of cards in your sideboard, so it's pretty hard to have enough cards to have a cohesive plan both on the play and on the sideboard against like this matchup, this matchup, this matchup, this matchup, right? But it's just like I think on the draw the Chalice, like sticking too much to the Chalice feels like kind of a liability, TBH.
Yeah, that's fair. And if ever there was a time where you could actually have that luxury, is now, just because your cards are so versatile. It's something I've talked a lot. How back, a few years or before all the super powerful cards from Modern Horizon and Modern Horizon 2 got printed, you were always wishing for 25 or 30 card sideboard, but now you've got these cards like Prismatic Ending that are just so versatile. You get Counterspell. The elementals are very good at covering your bases. Endurance is a card that you can bring in almost every matchup. I was actually making a sideboard guide for the deck, and out of the 7 decks I made the guide for, I think I brought in at least 1 endurance in every matchup, except for maybe Black Green Yawgmoth. And even there, you could argue it's fine. So you've got these great sideboard options, and you're not missing. So you can. I like the idea of just Chalice, having the Chalice on the play and the bolts on the draw. Actually, that sounds really good. Because you asked what card you're worried about. You're not worried about any card specifically. Maybe Dash Ragavan. It's just the value it gives you throughout the game. It feels like if you stick a Chalice on one and you can not fold behind, you don't really have to do anything besides survive, because eventually they're going to draw so many 1-minute cards that it's going to provide you a passive card advantage, or whatever you want to call it. Kind of in the same way it might work against a deck like Mono Green Tron. I mean, you're not scared of Chromatic Sphere, but if the game goes 10 turns, they're going to keep drawing these 1-mana cards, and they're going to draw way too many dead cards to be able to compete with you. Did we lose you, Pat?
No, you didn't lose me. I was just thinking about your point. Yeah, I mean, that kind of echoes my thoughts. Like, it's obviously better to have Chalice in play than it is to not have Chalice in play. But what Canis is describing is more the sacrifices that you make to maximize a Chalice on the draw are not necessarily worth the gains you get. So yeah, and in the Murktide matchup in particular, I think that their 1-mana spells aren't actually the cards that really do the most harm in that matchup, outside of their creatures, obviously, which are answerable by the cards that you would have it instead of Chalice. Why don't we talk a little bit more about this, like, Aspiring Spy kind of Rakdos Jundi deck, because you both said this is like a reasonably close matchup, and just from kind of like my heuristic understanding of things,
I never said that.
You never said that?
And I said that the Orion version of the deck excels at farming the Luru Spires.
Right. Very good. Okay, cool. Because my instinct would be that that's the outcome I would expect. I would expect that these kind of Thoughtseize mid-range decks to get absolutely steamrolled by decks where every single card can essentially be a 2-for-1, and they have no way of interacting with cards on the stack, essentially, so they can't protect themselves against the top of your deck. So, Gab, you said you thought it was a difficult matchup, but do you think maybe this is just kind of your small sample problem?
Yeah, maybe it's also the fact that I'm not as good against the cheap drops and struggle whether it's the cheap drops, Torak.
I definitely agree that Torak seems like a problematic card for you, especially since like you're all just kind of like 3 to 4 mana sorcery spells, and that it can really definitely snag multiple important spells in the mid game off of you.
Also, don't have as many Spreading Seas. Do you have 4 Spreading Seas in the main deck, Kanister?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have them in the main, and these cards are really good because Den of the Bugbear can be a problem, and Kroxa can be a problem, and was or spreading season makes their life kind of hell. Their mana is all tricky between Kroxa, the double black, the double red, the demand lands, etc. So I think that it's possible there's just a decent difference here as far as the match goes.
Yeah, you just need to like kind of match your hand early. Also, as time went on, in game, well, maybe not in game once, but like game 2, game 3, like I see my hands, and they kind of look like fine 3-4 lands plus spells, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I could keep, but then like I decide, what if they go turn 1 Ragavan? No, I had to keep then, and then I just mulligan, and then I succeed from my 6 card hand. With the Ren decks, you can just mulligan to 5. If you stick a Ren, you kind of unmulligan immediately.
Yeah,
That's a
100%
really nice
agree.
point. I would never like that. Might the surface level assumption is that if you play against a Thoughtseize deck, that mulliganing is largely a larger disadvantage in those matchups that you get your hand picked apart. But when it's so important to just kind of blunt that early Ragavan, and you have cards like Ren and 6 that let you catch up, I can imagine that that heuristic kind of fails in this instance. So yeah, that's a really nice observation.
Yeah, well, in a way, you could. I think you right now more so need to give yourself time to take draw steps rather than against the Thoughtseize, rather than keep cards in hands against the Thoughtseize. Because frequently it's Ragavan and then Thoughtseize later, and like that's the most scariest opening rather than the Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf of the past.
Yeah, exactly. That's previously was the early turn plays were the discard spells, and they would kind of keep you off balance, and then they would cast their Lilianas and their Tarmogoyfs and their Bloodbraid Elves or whatnot. But here they're really kind of putting you on the back foot and then picking apart your responses later on. So yeah, it's just imperative to interact as early as humanly possible. Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. Do you think these like rock decks are kind of? Do you think they have an important place in the metagame, or do you think that they kind of fighting uphill against all these blue-white decks and four-color mid-range decks in general? Because we haven't seen much from them recently. But then if I look at the challenge results, there's kind of Spike in 5th place. Then there's Twinless Twin playing the kind of Grixis Death Shadow version, which I'm essentially lumping into the same category. They're both kind of like Lurus discard decks. Do you think there's any reason why we're seeing a kind of resurgence of those over this weekend?
I'm not super sure what is the appeal of those decks, but they certainly are strong decks with like good cards that can get you somewhere. Arguments that I've heard is that decks like the Grixis Shadow specifically tends up to match a bit better against Murktide and Hammer too, so it kind of does kind of a similar thing against those two best decks in the metagame as 4-color Yorion is trying to, where it's like a bit better suited and has a bit more card advantage in those two matchups. Specifically against Hammer, I think it's probably Grixis Rakdos. I'm not sure about that exactly, and correct me if you think differently, but I think those are probably one of the better strategies against Hammer that you can choose. Colagan's commands decks.
Yeah, look, again from a kind of like first principles kind of approach, yeah, I would normally assume that the deck full of removal spells and like cheap interaction would be good against a deck like Hammer, but I invariably find myself when I play versus Hammer with any of these, essentially red interaction decks, I find myself almost in that kind of like Splinter Twin-esque dilemma where like interacting is kind of imperative, but at the same time tapping out is problematic, and then they just grind at you so well. Like if you kind of like, okay, I'm going to keep up mana, and then they just open on like Esper Sentinel, and suddenly I'm kind of like 2 cards behind, and I'm behind on board, and they can kill me at any point in time. I really feel like the 4-color decks and stuff like that have a better matchup against against Hammer just because their interaction is free. And
yeah, you're probably
there's
right.
no free spells in these red-black decks.
Yeah, I only played that matchup once, the red black against Hammer Time, and despite drawing decently in the match, I ended up losing. You know, I drew removal, I drew Kulligan's Command, and it didn't feel super great. I do believe the matchup is favored for red black, and it might just be a case of just Spike doing well because he's a really good player too. I know he likes to brew. He'll play brew, and occasionally, maybe when he doesn't really know what to play, or maybe when he thinks the meta is right, he'll go back to that Ragdos deck that's kind of pet deck of, has been one of his pet decks for the last, months, 6 months, whatever, ever since that deck became a thing. He was one of the first ones to build it and play it and do well with it. I'm not sure I would read too much into it.
Yeah, it feels to me that Spike kind of takes the opposite approach to what you've been taking over the last few months, Kanister, where Spike is playing different decks every day, tuning this, tuning that, switching around a lot, and you've just been holding steady. Like, is that just a decision you decided to make for a streaming point of view, or did you think this is just kind of strategically optimal and best chance of winning?
I tried to. Well, I think it depends on the player, but I tried the approach of switching a lot, and sometimes when I just don't have a deck I particularly like, I switch a lot, but I typically just don't win as much then, and I really need to get comfortable with a deck, learn the deck, play the matchups a dozen times to understand which cards are really all that good in the matchup or not. Like, for example, it took me ages to realize that I actually don't like Flusterstorm against Cascade decks out of my deck too much, because it goes dead against Rhinos and they can resolve Rhinos through your counter spells. So, I've been using the conventional wisdom that Flusterstorm equals great versus Cascade for a month, for month and a half, but then after thinking about it more, writing my cyborg plans down for a guide, and then thinking about playing even more, I just realized, okay, well, that actually is not working as a strategy, and that's a flaw in my strategy. When I don't play too much, I just play. I just don't win as much. So
yeah, no, Modern's format that rewards skill for sure, just because there's so many decks, so many matchups, way more than in Standard, so it really rewards people who play the format a lot. And I agree about Flusterstorm. I've never been a fan. I remember when the first time I picked up Murktide, the list had 2 or 3 Flusterstorm in the sideboard, and it was the first card I kind of trimmed or cut and added maybe a Dispute, a Forced Negation. I just wasn't a fan, not only the Cascade thing, but in a format where Teferi Time Raveler is so prevalent. I just don't want my counter spells to not be able to counter a Teferi in general,
Yeah, I have 0 Flusterstorms in my sideboard in my Murktide deck at the moment. I have 3 Spell Pierces in the 75 now. I just think answering that turn 2 Ren is great, answering the Teferi is good, it clean answers the Chalice, and it essentially does the same thing that you want Flusterstorm to do against Rhinos, which is to protect you against turn 3 Rhino. And yeah, it's
we can make it good.
Just don't get Flusterstorm goes dead, Spell Pierce goes dead in the same way again in the mid to late game.
Well, you can make a good argument for playing Flusterstorm alongside Dragavan, because then you finish games quickly. But when I'm playing a deck that invariably is going to go to turn 10, then not being able to counter a spell in the late game does come up more often than if you were to stick turn 1 Dragavan and push it to victory, right?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm from the blue-red side. I'm kind of talking more about. I just value the flexibility of Spell Pierce and countering the threats that Gab alluded to and the other ones that I mentioned. But yeah, especially in your deck in particular, trying to win on turn 10, Flusterstorm doesn't seem like it does anywhere near as much as a card like Dolphin's Veto, for example.
Yeah, because I think we can agree that when paired against Living End, you would rather have Flusterstorm than Spell Pierce in your blue-red Murktide deck.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you just have to do the straight head-to-head comparison, of course.
Yeah. But of course, it might be that overall in the metagame, you'd still prefer to play Spell Pierces because they're like better in more spaces, but not that much worse.
Yeah, so maybe not an apt comparison in response to what you were saying, about cutting spell pierce from your sideboard plans for your 4-color deck. But I just, maybe something worth highlighting that I felt was worth highlighting.
So you've been collecting data, but that's just who plays what, right? Or the percentages of decks played. You have no idea about win rate or anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been only doing that for like three or four past challenges. So like this weekend and like the past weekend. So it's not like a super long ongoing thing, but even like looking before this weekend, looking at the past weekends, metagame share and seeing how many decks people actually bring to tournaments, like helped me inform my decisions. But we didn't do like win rates, etc. That would require a lot more work, but you could do that like the entire matrix.
You could just go for every replay, like write down what everyone's playing and look at the results of every round while you're still in the tournament.
Yeah.
Have you played Blue-Red Murktide a lot at any point, or even a bit, or is it a deck you've kind of just ignored?
Yeah, I played it a little bit, especially earlier after MH dropped.
Yeah,
I played a decent amount of it, I guess. I don't think I played it in many challenges, maybe in one.
Because I was under the impression going into this week anyways, for me, Blue-Red Murktide was the best deck in the format, but I wanted to play that Omnath deck because I had done so well with it in the leagues, and I wanted to put it to the test. And I felt like if I actually was trying to maybe win the tournament, I would just play Blue-Red Murktide, or maybe Living End, just because I'm comfortable with the deck. What do you think about Blue-Red Murktide or if you want to give us, in your opinion, the tier 1 decks, the absolute best decks in Modern right now? Do you think there's one deck that's much better than the others? Do you think your Elementals deck's just better than the rest? Or do you think there's tier 1 decks?
I definitely do not think it's better than the others. The Orion deck is a metagame deck, certainly in that it tries to exploit the most popular decks. But it's like the degree with which it is weak to the bad matchups is like super weak. I don't know how many matches I would need to play against Belcher to end up winning one, but it could be a lot. I think you could say that Blue-Red Murktide is like the default best deck in the format, or amongst best decks. I think it is not clear like which decks are the most powerful, and there is like kinda a few powerful cores of decks running around that are pretty clearly like amongst the best things to do. Like you could say that Hammer is pretty clearly amongst those. You could say that the Ragavan decks in some manner are around those. I think Blue-Red is like probably the best of the Ragavan deck. If Blue-Red got to play a companion, then I think it would be like not a question whatsoever. But not getting a Lurrus is a little bit of a bummer for them, or maybe for the better.
Yeah.
And then the like 4-color Planeswalkers, Omnath, Ritual Mentors, like whatever good cards. That's also a core of a deck that this one probably has the most variability, but it's definitely like the same class of decks. And I think Cascade decks are also up there.
Yeah. What about Blue-White Control? Because you said you top 8 a challenge with Blue-White Control. Did you play much since? Or I feel like it's not the greatest right now, even though Wafo wins a lot with it. But that's because I've played a bit, and people have asked me a lot about Blue-White Control, and for me it's a tier below all these decks. It's still a little too fair, and the version is good, but yeah, I've not been super impressed.
In a way, I think you could say that the 4-color Planeswalkers deck that you're playing is like kind of either a hybrid or like more similar to Blue-White than it is to the 4-color piles traditionally. to be frank. So it might be that the 4-color blue-white is better than blue-white.
Yeah, it is true that deck just looks like someone just mashed a blue-white control deck and Omnath deck together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always saw the 4-color Planeswalker deck as kind of like an evolutionary step of the blue-white control archetype. A little bit less instant speed, but a little bit more tap out, and just improving its card quality overall. I definitely agree with Kanister that the best Ragavan deck would have to be blue-red. I just think that it also just establishes a lot of kind of the rules of the format, like the terms of engagement are you have to interact on turn 1, and you have to have something that's keeping pace with something that's doing something very powerful things mana efficiently. And blue-red essentially like sets rules of engagement in a lot of respects. It might not be the best deck on any given weekend because, like you say, Kanister saying it's like really easily targeted. If you just have a lot of removal spells, or if you load up on chalices and removal or whatnot, then you can basically make them do nothing essentially. But it's ready to win a challenge on any given weekend. I definitely agree that Hammer is also just absolutely nuts as well. Like, it's just so scary to play against. It didn't do well this weekend, but I don't think that means anything in particular.
The funny thing about Hammer is that, no matter who you ask, they're going to tell you that they have at least a good Hammer matchup. Sometimes they will tell you that they have a great Hammer matchup. And
not me. I'm proud of my awful Hammer matchup at all points in time.
Okay, so you are seemingly an exception, but whenever we like go through decks with like anyone, or just take a look, okay, so what has a poor Hammer matchup? Sometimes the burn players sheepishly admit to having a poor one, or like sometimes, well, you're going to say that, but for the most part, everybody seemingly claims that they beat Hammer, but somehow it's still like at the top of the MTG Goldfish page for the past. How long was it? I guess it's not at the top if you look at it past 7 days.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of the Hammer Time deck. I don't feel like it's super great, but I might be biased. I feel like when we were playing Blue-Red Murktide, we even got it to a spot where I was decent in that matchup. I think it's a great matchup for Living End. It felt pretty good for that 4-color Omnath deck I've been playing. Even Blue-White Control seems kind of okay against it.
I think that those last 2 decks really gain a lot of percentage points with just kind of like Solitudes and Furies, though. Like I was saying before, just if your mana is committed to being reactionary, you can't really do anything against them, because they put that Splinter Twin pressure on you, where you just got to kind of accept your fate on turn 3 or whatnot. And if you're just holding out mana to be reactive, it just doesn't work. I remember when I was playing a lot of Murktide, I was just trying all sorts of different strategies against them to try and improve my matchup, like cutting all 8 1-drops and having all the Blood Moons and all this sort of stuff. And I never felt like I could get into a place that I was particularly comfortable with, so I just wrote it off at some point in time.
The tricky thing about the Hammer deck is that it's also super complicated. Everything costs 1 mana, and you can also like target your cards with different cards all the time, and there's so many options. Whenever I play this deck myself, I kind of do like medium to poorly often, and I think it's super hard. Also, I noticed that whenever I play against a Hammer player who's kind of a no-name, I don't know who they are, then like it's easy. I kill all the creatures, then they have nothing, I win. When I play against somebody who is, for example, like high up there on the trophy leaderboard, then it suddenly like becomes hard, and they like take better advantage. They take advantage better out of the spots where I'm slightly vulnerable for in a small window, and like I end up losing games that feel like I probably shouldn't lose, or like feel weird to lose.
Reminds me of Infect a lot in that manner.
Yeah, it's pretty tricky, I think, like evaluating the Hammer's deck exact power level.
Yeah, kind of agree with that. We came to the same conclusion, and maybe it was a false narrative, but you seem to go in that direction when Laplacian, I'm not sure how you say their name exactly, but
Laplacian.
They just top-aided multiple weekends in a row with Hammer Time, when Hammer Time was not maybe doing that great. And when you see just one player doing well over and over again, and maybe the deck not doing that great in general, you could just think that it's like really high skill deck. And you talked about the fact that it's all 1 mana cards. That's something that's been relevant in old formats really in the past so many years now that people always say, oh, control's tough to play and aggro is easy, but I feel like a lot of time it's actually the other way around, just because
Absolutely not.
with aggressive decks you have cheap cards, so you actually have decisions early in the game. Whereas control deck, you're like, okay, I have to play my 2-mana removal spell or counter spell on 2, I have to play my Archmage Shaman on 3, I have to play my thing on 4. And that makes total sense as far as the hammer time the deck goes.
Yeah. In
Right.
hammer, you also get like so much more. You have to commit pretty hard when you have to commit, and you got to choose the spots where you commit, and you sometimes need to commit a turn or 2 or 3 turns before you know you're going to commit, deciding if you're going to hold a hammer for Sigarda's Aid or play it so that you can equip it with Pure Steel 2 turns down the road. It's all pretty rough, and it always makes me scratch my head when I try to play hammer myself.
Yeah. What about you, Get Smart? Have you got a chance to get a league of Blue-Red or 2 in?
I haven't played any, but I've been building various different versions that look a little bit different to me on my Magic Online account. So I currently have a version that has only 2 Murktides and it has 3 Seasoned Pyromancers in the 75. I'm trying to get away from being vulnerable to a card like Solitude and having outs to cards like Chalice of the Void by just having Seasoned Pyromancer do the kind of heavy lifting, more or less, just cycling bad cards and making elemental tokens. I haven't put it to its test yet, but it's where my brain's going, kind of less Archmage Charms, more Blood Moons, and Seasoned Pyromancers. That's the best thing I've got at the moment. I just, the kind of more stock list I haven't built in my account is exactly the 60 that won the Sunday Challenge, that beat you in the quarterfinals. And my sideboard is almost identical, with the exception of Dress Down, which is the card I can't really figure out very easily.
Yeah. I like Dress Down the few times I played with it, but I felt like it was maybe not super essential. It is really nice in that Lurrus Death Shadow deck. Not only is it a card you get value out of with Lurrus, but obviously there's a combo with Death Shadow, where Death Shadow is just 13/13 when Dress Down is in play. Yeah, I thought Blue-Red was going to have a great weekend. I was actually joking. I think on Saturday when I was 2 or 3-0, I got paired against Murktide, and I was like, oh yeah, it's the X and O bracket. Obviously I'm going to start getting paired against Murktide. And I beat it, and I got paired against it next round. Actually against James from Parvo Live. He was up late playing a Modern Challenge. So that was cool. And turned out, if you look at the top 8s anyways, the Murktide didn't have a great weekend. It won the Sunday Challenge, but I think that was the only player who managed to place in the top 8.
Yeah. If it's arriving in numbers similar to what Canis is estimating, then it's not performing very well overall. I mean, I know it's incredibly laborious to extract all that data manually, and I don't expect anyone to do it, but I would be curious to see exactly what his win percentage is overall.
I think it was getting pretty good at getting to top 32, but I'm not sure, I don't remember exactly, but top 8 there's only 8 people in the top 8, right? But
yeah, I do
when you collect the data. Okay, well, I'll go. When you collect the data, typically you go through the first rounds and you see those players, from the bottom of the standings. You click on the decks and you don't see many Murktides here. You click, you see Enchantress, you see Tron, you see some decks you never imagined before. But then as you go higher, more Murktides tend to be here. So
yeah, I do like that main deck a lot. The 1 Spell Pierce, 1 Force of Negation, 1 Explosives, 1 Brazen Bar, only 3 Lightning Bolt, and the 2 Blood Moon, the 2 Jace in the sideboard. Dress on. Yeah,
I can't get past the 3 Lightning Bolt, but I kind of understand it now. I'm just curmudgeonly old man thinks that 3 Lightning Bolt is terrible. I just don't know how many matches of Blue-Red Murktide I win, because I'm just going to draw run a bolt, and I have Death Threat, no Dragon Rage Channeler in play, and it's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
Lightning Bolt's just not very good against Ren and 6, I guess.
Yeah, no, bad against Ren and 6, bad against Teferi Plus, bad against Teferi Hero of Dominaria, bad against Omnath. I understand that it's not the right time to be playing it, but it just kind of, my instinct would be that every time I would start a deck that wants Lightning Bolt, I would just start with 4. But yeah, I think I'm starting to believe that I'm wrong, and that the kind of multiple challenge wins and top 8 results over the last couple of weeks is right, and 3 lightning bolts where to start. I agree with you. I like the shell a lot, though. I think this is a nice conventional place. What do you think of this season Pyromancer idea? Like, both of you play Solitude and like Fury decks. Is that the sort of card you'd be afraid of in any capacity?
I think it sounds potentially solid and worth trying out. You got me intrigued.
Yeah, I think Season Pyromancer is kind of card in the vein of Red and 6 cards, just so busted.
Yeah, it's one of my secret favorite cards from the first Modern Horizon set that I just never really play with.
Yeah. Have people been doing that in Murktide?
No, they haven't been doing it in Murktide. I saw one sideboard that had one copy of it a long time ago, like really early on, and I tried it myself and I never drew it, and then I just moved off of it because whatever, like I'll just do whatever's doing well for me. And now I'm thinking coming back around to it, since like there's 4 Solitudes in basically like half the top 8 decks, and I play against blue white all the time, and I play against 4 color all the time in the leagues. So yeah, the season Pyromancer is like a pretty straightforward kind of bait and switch essentially for Murktide. Like Murktide's like actually a bit of a liability, not really a liability, but like a lot of setup for quite a lot of vulnerabilities, and so Season Pyro was kind of where my mind immediately turned to. It also lets you get away with that from the awkwardness of wanting to play Archmage's Charm, but also wanting to have Blood Moon in your deck in the same matchups, whereas you basically get to have the card advantage engine that doesn't force you to like go out of your way to fetch weird mana to like play your Blood Moon. Like you can just get double island and it's okay.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about it, honestly, too, that it's a way to spend your red mana under Moon. Like a really good way to spend your red mana under Moon.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about cards like Chandra, Torture Defiance. I think that card's kind of bad now. Like it's not good enough Magic card anymore for modern power level play. So yeah, I was just trying to find ways to get off Archmage's Charm, basically, because obviously it's like a good card and you want that extra bit of card advantage in the right matchups. But Pyromancer just seemed like the natural fit that if I was trying to like be strong against Solitude too.
Oh, that's interesting. It's a card that basically sees no play right now, despite being one of the cards in the format. So, I mean, you know what you got to do, Pat.
All right, I'll fire it up. Don't worry. I've been playing a lot of Storybook Brawl, but I will fire up Magic Online this week and we can report back.
Is there anything else we want to talk about as far as Modern goes?
I did have one thing. I wanted to point out the mono red deck that came 8th place on the Sunday, which is just the weirdest mono red deck I've ever seen in my entire life. And they conceded to you essentially in the last round in playing for the win and they made it in 8th place. Is that right, Gab?
Yeah, it was weird. I actually wasn't sure, so I brought up the ghost protection, the hand hider. When I have a doubt, I'd rather peace of mind. I don't think they were ghosting at all, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. And we played a match that super sick game 3, and I was finally gonna win, but I had maybe 15 seconds left or 10 seconds left, and they had 20, and they just kind of timed out their last turn. So maybe they just kind of acknowledged the fact I had the win on board, and they were being quote unquote honorable and giving me the win, and they had great breakers, so they made it anyways. But yeah, it was all weird at the end. I wasn't too sure what happened.
But have you seen this list though? It's absurd. I've never seen anything like it.
I think I saw it just from someone found it for me mid-match on Goldfish. What do you think is so absurd about it?
Well, for people listening along at home who aren't scrolling through the results right now, it's mono red. Mm-hmm. It's like 20 lands. It's 4 Arid Mesa, 4 Den of the Bugbear, 12 Mountains, and then its creatures are like 4 Abbot of Carol Keep, 4 Bone Crusher Giant, 4 Dragon Rage Channeler, 4 Monastery Swiftspear, 4 Skull Scar Mage, 4 Firebolts, 4 Light Up the Stage, 4 Lava Dart, 4 Lightning Bolt, 4 Relic of Progenitus. There's a lot going on here, and I can't quite process it. My tiny idiot brain is just like there's something at play here that I'm just not privy to.
Yeah, Relic with Firebolt and Lava Dart is really weird. Not playing Season Pyromancer.
It's a Relic Progenitus for Delirium. for attack on Radius Channeler,
But it
but I'm
doesn't
not
work
sure
with
how
Delirium.
well that works.
Yeah, the relics are really, really weird. Almost makes you wonder if it's not a typo. But yeah, I mean, you got to get Giganta, I guess. The Comrade Giganta, so no seasoned Pyromancer. But yeah, I played that matchup. I actually played around Blood Moon in game one, and it might have cost me the game. They didn't have Blood Moon in their deck. I guess I won game one, but it always costs you a lot when you play around Blood Moon and they don't actually have Blood Moon in the main.
Probably cost you a lot of time on clock.
Yeah, just tanking about the lands to fetch and whatnot. It's a nightmare. But yeah, it is a weird list. I mean, it's really just the relic of Progenitus, right? That are a little
Definitely
off.
that, and like the no Ragavans, and then like the Soulscar mages and the Abbot of Carol Keeps and stuff like that. It's just weird to me, and good on them for doing so well. It's just I haven't seen anything quite like that before. I mean, I've seen these kind of like more big reddish decks with like Hammer of Garden and stuff like that, but this is
it's like a prowess deck from the past, right? It's not that weird, I would say. I wouldn't say it's that weird not to play Ragavan, as like prowess creatures tend to play well when there is many of there. But it's super weird that the relic is there. It's like kind of weird that it's lacking Manamorphos with 12 prowess creatures in the DRC. And I guess like there's maybe more questions that you could ask, but
Yeah. I feel like one of the reasons that deck did so well, I think, is Den of the Bugbear. I've been really impressed by that card playing against it. It's been really, really tough. You know, I don't have too many spreading seas in the deck, no Lightning Bolt. And it was really good out of the really scary out of Spike's deck, Red Leg deck against me. And I was really scared of the Den was just a massive threat. Card I think super good.
definitely good if you don't play instant speed removal in your deck.
Right.
Den of the Bugbear asked that question.
That was Kanister's cat. Or was it Teddy?
It was my cat.
I think it was your cat?
It was not.
Oh, I think it was Teddy then. I wasn't sure. It sounded kind of like a meow, but...
Nah, it was Teddy. That was Teddy waking up and having a bit of a whinge.
Yeah.
Sorry for Kanister playing along at home. I'm recording this from the room where my son is also sleeping. It's the only place you can get space in the house at the moment.
So, since we have you on the podcast for the first time, we've had Mengucci before, and Reed, and Spike, never you. What are your plans now that pro Magic play is gone? You're still rivals for next year, so you get paycheck and invites to the Arena Championship. There's the first championship coming up in December, which is standard and historic. Are you plan on trying it all, or just very little? Do you have any thoughts about the future of Magic in general, or I don't know, anything?
Realistically, my focus from like the past year or maybe like a bit longer was streaming, and right now I'm also trying to like put more energy into streaming and more thought into improving that, etc. Working more of that, maybe expanding some like content wise. Magic the Gathering, Pro League, I don't know about that. I will be competing in those tournaments. I don't enjoy playing Standard nor Arena nearly as much, like hobbystically wise, compared to playing Modo and Modern.
Yeah.
So it definitely feels a bit more like a chore. I will be participating in the tournaments that my rivals contract makes me participate in, and I will be preparing for those tournaments. I will not be ignoring them, but like certainly like the first focus is streaming and etc. Probably not gonna be taking days or weeks of streaming to prepare for tournaments.
You think it's just because of the way Standard is right now, or is it because you just had to play so much Standard for the first 2-3 years of MPL that you're kind of standard out. You just can't take it anymore.
No, it's not that. I started by playing Modern when I started playing Magic, so that was like go to format I enjoyed, and then like from that, like transitioning to playing with Standard kind of feels like if somebody was taking toys away from you, because you need to play with like lamer cards, and you put combat tricks in a sideboard of your aggro decks because that's like the best option you've got, and like that's really a head scratcher when you are transitioning from like first playing Modern and powerful cards, and then you get like tandem tactics in the sideboard of your mono white deck in Standard. And like in general, I do like the gameplay of Modern and older formats that much more than Standard. Like I enjoy Standard, but in very small doses, and I would not be playing Magic for 8 hours a day if I were to play Standard. Not that enjoyable to me. So the fact that the first year of the MPL was like intense Standard-wise was not that. Like it was not really playing much of a role. But I'm also I think I'm way worse at playing Standard than I am at playing Modern. So when I put my heart into it on Modo and the challenges, I can keep up good results all the time, and like X2 most of the challenges I play, and top 8 pretty decent amount of them, etc. And I'm not sure if it is entirely within my capability to perform consistently super well in Standard against like other players who do excel at Standard.
Yeah, but that's probably just because you play way more Modern. If you can put in as much time and thoughts as you do in Modern for Standard, surely.
Yeah, well, that's a feedback loop, right? Because I feel good when I win, so I play more and I play better, etc. As I never hardly ever got to like activate that feedback loop when playing Standard. I also have some gripes with Arena. Mainly the ladder system is about as unattractive of a system for me to participate in for longer amounts of time. In Modo, you join a league, you have to pay tickets or play points to get there. So you get some amount of investment from every player who wants to play needs to pay those like 10 tickets to get there. So at least some investment is being done, and people get emotionally invested into that too. So you play against people who care just slightly bit more than you do when you play on ladder. When you play against people who like there's no filtration like that, so you can play against anyone. And when you play a league on Modo, you have the sense of purpose. It's gonna end in like a set amount of matches. Like if you go 5-0, you get like a reward that's actually tangible, etc. When you play on ladder, it goes as long as you would like it to go, and it never ends, and there is no tangible reward. So for me, it just doesn't work as a motivator. So those like factors combined make me like not want, and probably I will never commit myself as much to playing Standard / Arena as much as I am committing myself to playing Modern or Magic Online.
Yeah, that's fair. The ladder system is not super appealing, and if there wasn't tournaments to prepare for, the ladder system alone is not enough to like. It's not like the most fun or super motivation. Like getting number 1 is just such a grind, for instance, and it's a testament to commitment, but just why it's not. I agree.
Yeah, the big problem, let me also like add that when playing on Arena, also that I found it too much harder to not tilt when I play against people, and sometimes you just want to build a deck and like try it out on ladder and see if it, like, for example, holds up against like, let's say, most popular decks on Arena on its standard that you could play against in tournaments, but then you play against some weird decks and you have no way of knowing if it's just some meme deck that somebody put because they thought it's funny, or if it's some actually quite competitive deck that they want to play. That lack of filtration makes it hard to know. It just makes me feel like I'm wasting my time doing that.
It always felt to me like the ladder is essentially like playing in the tournament practice room on Magic Online. Sometimes someone turns up there and they're committed to doing this properly, but a lot of the time it's just kind of like no counters, no LD, no discard, please.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but it's true. You don't feel like modern leagues are somewhat similar? Because I feel like it used to be the case. Maybe it's not as much the case anymore.
I never play against non-tier decks in Moto League. I just like fire up, and every time my opponent plays one line, I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you're doing. Yeah, you're playing a deck that I know and have looked at card lists for, and I know basically the 75 cards you're playing more or less.
Yeah, it might be the Modern Horizon effect, right? There's just so little room now for brews, and do well was kind of mediocre decks, I guess.
This is definitely the most condensed I think that Modern's ever felt like to me, outside of kind of like those weird Hogak, Eldrazi Winter style metagames.
Well, I definitely I do play against weird decks in leagues when I play leagues on Moto, but again, everybody who's playing the weird deck in a league at least committed some thought to, and they had at least maybe some belief in their deck, willing to spend 10 tickets on that, so that makes it that much better.
I feel like if you do get to Mythic, high Mythic on the ladder, you probably start playing against mostly good decks, though. Do you not think that's the case? Or are you talking about in general, like grinding the ladder up to Mythic, or even at Mythic, you feel like it's still not that great?
I don't remember how I haven't played so long.
Yeah, okay,
but
fair enough.
Probably it's less of an issue in Mythic, but then I think I still couldn't consistently pair up against a tier deck, what I would consider a tier deck in Mythic, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, games on the ladder are not super valuable. I feel like maybe 10 matches on the ladder, even when you're at Mythic, might be worth one good match played against a teammate when you're testing for a tournament, for instance. I'm not sure that's a super far-fetched ratio.
Sounds fair.
Well, on a scale to 1 to 10, what's your excitement when you play Modern these days, and what's your excitement playing some Standard? Was the new Crimson Vow set that comes out in a few days? Putting you on the spot. Cause there's some cool. There's a Red Bull tournament this weekend. There's a Crokies tournament. I'm not sure if they're on the same day or not, but I know I'm looking forward to the new set. The cards are not super good. We actually did a set review with Kanister yesterday. That was fun, but
conclusion was that all cards are bad. Yeah,
more or less, except for the two ones, the Thalia and the green 2/1. But I feel like it's the sets. It's easy to underestimate sets because you're used to seeing the powerful decks, and you're like, no, there's no way these new cards can compete. And then turns out, you missed a card or two, and the new cards are better than you think. You don't have to answer my scale question if you don't want to, but I thought it was kind of I was curious.
Well, I'm not actively. Well, okay, so let's say when Midnight Hunt dropped, I was actually excited about Standard briefly enough to go to Arena, swipe for 100 packs, open them, build a werewolf deck, play with it a little bit from bronze to silver, and then it kind of wore off. And then I didn't play Arena till the Arena Open, where I got to day 2, actually lost 2 matches in a row for the 1K.
Okay.
So
That's roughly my experience with the last set that came out on Arena as well. I bought some packs. I made a deck. I played it a bit, and then I was like, and now what do I do?
Yeah, I mean, so like I'm not drastically opposed to playing standard ever. Like, and I will be playing more standard in this set because there's a Innistrad Championship coming in a month. So I'll be doing that, but
yeah,
I'm more excited to continue playing modern. You know, for example, like, you know, sometimes I wake up and I start my stream and, you know, I think about whether to, you know, continue tuning the same deck I've been tuning for the past 2 months, and that's an attractive proposition. But sometimes I just find some super stupid list that's, you know, 5-odd. And for example, today I spent the entire day playing first like Magda Changelings and then Black Green Jairuda. Urborg Cabal Coffers combo.
Is that the 6-mana companion?
Yes. The even only companion. So, you know, just feels like the funny stuff that you can do is funnier in modern than it is in standard.
I think you should maybe give Historic a little try. It's been fun. I've been enjoying it, and there's a bunch of different powerful strategies. The decks are actually, you know, good. Phoenix is good. First deck. Your old Junt on Sacrifice. There's multiple forms. There's a lot of tuning and tweaking to do, and probably lots of that are still unexplored.
I very well could see myself playing, you know, historic challenges on Magic Online if such a thing existed. But again, like, not opposed to playing historic.
There's the structure of the
just
arena,
like not enticed enough by the format to play it on ladder on Arena right now.
I wanted to just put my hat in the ring about what you're saying. Like, you don't enjoy playing standard on volume as much as you enjoy playing modern. I've always felt the same way, but I have enjoyed standard in these doses where, like, if you have something specific that you're preparing for, be it like, you know, Pro Tour or the local Grand Prix or something, or Grand Prix that you're going to, or, you know, PDQ season or whatnot, it really felt like nice to kind of like dive into a standard format with purpose. But this is kind of day to day, like, this is something that I'm going to do like day in, day out, or every, you know, a couple of times a week. It never really held that appeal for me either. But I feel that's never been the case with modern. It's always been kind of like, cool, I'll jump back in, and whenever I feel like playing Magic, like, modern's always there, and it always feels this. I get the enjoyment of playing Magic out of it without necessarily having to play for significant stakes. Like, it just has to be the league buy-in that I'm playing for, and I feel pretty good about it. But I wouldn't do that on a kind of like day-to-day basis for standard.
Yeah, I guess that's how I feel too. Like, I also I even play weekly FNMs, right? Which are modern, and also I don't know if that's another feedback loop. If I enjoy it more because, you know, it's like something I play weekly with my friends, or if like we play it because I enjoy it more. That's, well, probably the other way around.
Yeah, I don't know. I only play. I feel like I need something to look forward to in a tournament. Maybe it's because I don't love the game as much as I used to, or maybe I've always been playing only competitively for so long and not really casually. That's kind of all I know right now. But I hear you just kind of aimlessly playing standard is. All right.
Anything more we wanted to do? You said you wanted to talk about historic a little bit, but
just touch a tiny bit because I've been playing that cool deck. It's a blue-white affinity deck built by Aaron Gertler, and it's been really strong for me so far. It looks a little weird at first, but, well, actually no, it makes sense. But you're not playing Zai, you're not playing Emery. It's basically affinity. Nettle Cyst is a big part of the deck. You also get a Thought Monitor. No, not Thought Monitor. The 2/2 flying was affinity that draws you 2 cards.
That's what Monitor.
That
is. For some reason, I thought Thought Monitor was like some old artifacts, like 4/6. There was something mod. Anyways, and that deck's been been really good for me. If anyone's looking for a fun historic deck, you play Esper Sentinel, you play a lot of the modern cards. You get the Smith that digs for artifacts, and yeah, pretty lean. Relies on Nelisys. Shadow Spear has been MVP. You don't have really a way to tutor for it. You just draw into it, and the trample lifelink is huge. You get to play Portable Hole. You have Glass Casket in your sideboard. You have a lot of good cards. You get to play the Artifact Land Treasure Vault to power up your deck. And yeah, it's been good for me so far. We'll see. We'll see what happens. You know, we're not that far away. We're 3 weeks away from decklist being due, and one format is standard, one format is historic. But
yeah, it's a split format, is it? That's great.
Yeah, it's split format. For some reason, I thought it was going to be standard only, or no, I thought it was going to be historic only, but it's going to have standard, which is cool because Crimson Vow comes out in a few days, so it should be a fun tournament to watch.
Shall we put our life on the line?
Yeah, let's put our life on the line.
Right. So for those of you who are new to the podcast, this could include Kanister. I don't know if he's ever listened. I'm going to bet on the side that he's never listened. But Life on the Line is a theoretical tournament that you're playing tomorrow. If the stakes are that if you win, you get to continue living your life, and if you lose, you die. You have to if we have to pick a deck from formats we talked about this week, so we'll just do that. We'll just do Modern today. So what are you going to play in this tournament, Gab?
I will play... Wow, that's a really tough one. I think I'm going to go with the deck I've been playing and, you know, maybe make some few tweaks based on our discussion tonight. Maybe lightning bolts, the way to sideboard was Dallas, etc., etc. So I'm gonna stick with that deck. It's been powerful. It's been impressive, and other people have done well with it. Not just like it's not just me running hot and maybe playing well, etc. What about you, Kanister?
Well, I would go with the deck list that I've been playing lately because, as I said, I do feel like I need a fair amount of practice to perform well with a deck, and I do have a fair amount of practice with that deck, and I also think it's a really strong deck that's well positioned. So
I'd like to remind you that an X2 finish will not cut it in this tournament.
Well, neither would like an X3 or X4. So
that's fine. I'm going to play Blue Red Murktide. I'm going to make the changes that we discussed here. I'm going to try this Pyromancer thing out because if I don't win, I don't want to live in this world anyway.
Cool. Should we do the Price is Right as well? Do we have a...
I'm not compelled to do the Price is Right today.
All right, let's skip the Price is Right. We'll wait for Harry for that one. I'm not even sure I would know where to look up the 1 week, or what do we do usually, the 1 week trend, or...
There's honestly no way of knowing. Harry, someone just tells me a card and I just shout out a number.
What's that segment?
We do the Price is Right.
Placement.
We pick a card and then we guess the price of the card on Card Market, and we look it up, and whoever's closest wins. Which is not exactly the Price is Right, because Price is Right, you have to underbid. If you go over, you automatically lose, but it's kind of lame, so
it's also not really a game.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough criticism of the Price is Right segment of the show. That will bring us to the end of the episode for this week. If you've made it this far, we love you. Gab, where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, Twitter @GabNassif, Twitch, streaming most days, pretty much every day, twitch.tv/yellowhat, and I also started putting in more work for my YouTube channel. I think it's Yellowhat MTG, but for me, just Yellowhat. I've started doing more than just uploading my stream VODs, so you can follow me there and go like my videos and like and subscribe, as they say.
I thought Harry was busy this week. Kanister, thank you so much for joining us, especially at short notice. And it's been, I honestly, that was a really, really enjoyable episode to do, and I feel like I learned a lot. Where can you want to plug your social media or your stream, etc.?
Twitter.com/Kanister_MTG, Twitch.tv/Kanister_MTG, YouTube.com/Kanister, not MTG. It's pretty bad. It's inconsistent, but
Yeah,
and also
Harry would tell you off the lack of brand unity. I don't give a flying fuck though.
It's bad. But there was also a second one, youtube.com/Kanister VODS, VODs, which is a archive of my VODs.
I think I'm gonna have to follow that one.
Stream without music.
Nice, even better. The strict upgrade to the Kanister live stream.
Well, in many people's views, but
That's all right. I like song requesting on your stream every now and then. Okay, you can find me subscribed to Kanister VODs on YouTube. The subscription will be under the name of Get Smart. You can also find me on Twitter under that name. Anyway, like I said, if you've made it this far in the episode, thank you so much, and we'll catch you next week. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for the talk.
Very nice. That was good fun.